This podcast is brought to you by Connect First Credit Union. I'm really excited today. We've got a really special guest to talk about, well, a lot of things, quite frankly, but we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges of business in this province. It's why we started the show in the first place, to talk about what's next and talk a little bit about things to get excited about, things that we should be excited about, quite frankly. You know, we know business has been tough, and it's been no doubt compounded by COVID. What a relief it is just to take the mask off so we can do this show together. Business formation has been more challenging in the last little while than it has to be if we're going to get this province on a track to success, like we know it's going to be in the decade ahead. All business has been struggling, certainly in this province over the last few months, but there's a lot of, I think, green shoots of really exciting things happening, certainly in the technology field, but I would say across many value-producing segments of the economy. And I think this is a really important topic because as we do finally start to emerge from COVID and as we start to see this province get a new footing for the future, for the decade that we need to take on this challenge ahead, we have to start thinking about where is that new business generation going to come from. And I couldn't think of a better person than Ray DePaul, the director of the Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Mount Royal University, to join us and have a bit of this conversation. And I have to say, just before I welcome him officially here, I can't think of a more accomplished individual on this topic of business creation, formation, business growth than Ray DePaul. We're going to talk a little bit about his background, his own experience. It's exciting. He's been with some of the tech giants of the world. He's created business in the past. He knows what he's talking about. So Ray, thank you for joining us.
Oh, I'm honored. Thanks for the intro.
So I could go and read your bio, and it's pretty awesome, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
I usually describe myself as a recovering entrepreneur, and I think it's just because I'm desperate to hold an attachment back to the people I respect most in the world, frankly, are these people that go out and do it. I was fortunate. I'm sure you know lots of people that were fortunate enough to choose the oil and gas industry in the 80s.
Yep.
And I was fortunate enough to choose technology back in the 80s and was fortunate to be in a little town called Waterloo, which went all in on technology early. I have a computer science background, so had a lot of stutter starts with startups and created some really cool technology. I think we created the first commercial email system and then went bankrupt. We actually tried to compete with the internet.
Wow.
That didn't go so well. But it's interesting because that was my first time I was laid off.
Yeah.
And then I realized how marketable I was, just, being in that sector. And it just removed all of these barriers to try to taking risks, just because you knew if something didn't work out, somebody else would be there. So I learned, lots of failures, lots of failures. And then I landed at this little company called RIM. And it was just pre-BlackBerry. And most people don't know this about RIM, but they were around 15 years before BlackBerry.
Yeah.
And they were an engineering consulting firm, just charging $200 an hour for their time. And then they just decided to take a flyer and try this new thing. And it was an amazing experience. Left that early. I think I was the first one to leave RIM without retiring. Did my own. Was fortunate enough to find a very smart professor from the University of Waterloo. And that went okay. And we sold that to Intel. And then I had that moment that I think a lot of people have, which is what's next. And I just decided that I was going to start working with others as opposed to trying to do it myself. Partially because it's easier, to be brutally honest. It's hard doing these things. And this opportunity came along to come to a city I didn't want to live in and work for a university I never heard of. And, 9 years later, it's the best move my wife and I did. We left our kids back in Toronto. They're grown. We didn't leave young kids in Toronto. So I've been working with the Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship since its beginning and have been working with young entrepreneurs. I also mix in there, sit on some boards and that just to keep sharp. I don't want to be the guy that just works with bad ideas, which is you see a lot of bad ideas at a university. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
it's pretty cool that you found your way here. And obviously, we're all very happy that you did. But you must have some amazing stories, when you think back of your experience with RIM, or, when you were building your business before selling it to Intel, which is a major coup d'etat, right? Like that is the pinnacle dream many entrepreneurs have in this world. Want to share any interesting insights or observations, what it was really like?
Early RIM was cult-like. It really was. You had this sense that you were changing the world. And when you're changing the world, all personal boundaries are gone. Like I've never worked as hard in my life, just because if you don't, then you won't change the world.
Right.
Like that was the feeling. So it was exhilarating. It was exhausting. There was times where you're coaching your son's soccer team, and you're wearing your two-way pager at the time on your belt, and it's going off because the CEO needs an answer now.
Right.
But it was an amazing experience. And I think, they say you learn a lot from failure, and you do, but my God, you learn from success too.
Yeah.
So I don't know where else I would have learned, how to build a global brand, how to scale.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those problems everybody goes, that'll be a nice problem to have. Well, it isn't once you have it. Figuring out how to expand into countries, how to expand manufacturing. Right. The original business plan we wrote for BlackBerry said that there was 1 million users. That was what our whole market was going to be. And we had failures along the way. I remember AOL bought 50,000 of them, thinking they were going to give them away to their customers who were consumers as opposed to professionals.
Right.
And I think they gave away 5,000 of them.
Wow.
They just couldn't, nobody cared.
Right.
So it's hard to think back. Like, this is 1999 we launched BlackBerry.
Yeah.
Google was founded in 1998.
Yeah.
So it was it wasn't a slam dunk.
Right.
I remember the time me and one of the CEOs almost sold all of the entire BlackBerry brand to a customer for $1 million.
Wow.
So fortunately they weren't smart enough to say yes.
No kidding.
But a great experience. Doing it myself gave me so much, my own company gave me so much respect for those who sit in the hot seat. I had a career of product management, which means you kind of own the product. You're the CEO of the product, but you don't have to worry about payroll. And then all of a sudden you're sitting in the hot seat and you're raising money and you're, worrying about payroll. And I think I did about 40 pitches to VCs in order to find a few that would give you a little bit of money. And I was told later that's a pretty good average. Only 40. Some of them have to do 100. So yeah, just a remarkable experience and thankful for it. And, I think if you look at Waterloo, and I think this is what I hope happens here, is some of the successes churned out this talent that knew how to have that success.
Right.
And then there's this wonderful virtuous cycle that happens. Right. And I think we're going to see the same thing here as some of these successes we now are seeing start to free up their talent, free up the wealth that was created from those companies, and they'll reinvest it in the city.
So Ray, you picked up all this experience working, building your own business very successfully, and working for RIM, of course, which was an icon of the early 2000s. Now you're supporting business leaders of the future, entrepreneurs who are building these exciting businesses. Like, what are some of the big questions they're bringing to you? Other than, how do I get rich quick? I mean, that's got to be one you get all the time.
Yeah, it's true. And it's funny, though. I don't get that one as much as I thought I would. And it might be a self-selection. If you're going to Mount Royal University, you're not cut from a certain type of cloth.
Right, okay.
You're not going back east and going to Queens and that kind of person. Right. So, first of all, I'm thrilled when we get a founder. But my ambition is really just to build talent.
Right.
And education can be pretty incremental when you think about it. You take a course, you learn a little bit. You take another course, you learn a little bit. So that's a very linear process. Meanwhile, the outside world is blowing up exponentially.
Right.
And I think the only way to get on that exponential curve in your education is to have some sort of transformational experience. Now, that can be traveling the world. That can be getting involved in even in sports teams. Like, if you're on a varsity team, you are working harder than most of your peers. But in our world, it means trying to start a business or trying to innovate. even if it isn't to start a business. So that's the lens I look at it is how can I give an experience, whether they succeed or fail, that changes these young people. And a lot of them will come up with, with weak ideas. And my first year that I did this, I judged them. And I know I was wrong because it is not about the idea. So a lot of them are, they're highly passionate. And, a phrase I created was, passion is necessary but insufficient. So it's all about execution. There's how many times have you saw a product and went, oh, I thought of that. That's the point. All you did was think of it. So we spent a lot of time with students getting them to execute.
Right.
A couple of years ago, we introduced a sales course at a university, which is unheard of. That sounds so dirty, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sales. But it's, how do you break that? Like I remember, I did a computer science degree and I never had to speak. Then I did an MBA and my deal with every one of my teams was I'll do more than my share of work if I don't have to present. It wasn't until my very last class, my MBA, I said, I got to wrap my head around this. I was actually deathly afraid of presenting. And I took this public speaking course. And it changed my life. And what happened, though, was I got up and did my first speech. My hands go. I'm half Italian. So when I speak, my hands are going. So I did my little speech. And the prof asked the class, so what did you think? And they gave gave good feedback. And they said, what did you think about his hands? And a student, ripped me apart about my hands. And then the prof said, I thought they were spectacular. And it was this moment where he gave me permission to just be myself.
Right on.
Right? Like, you don't have to be Tony Robbins. I don't look like Tony Robbins in any way, shape, or form. And that's the one thing I'm trying to get across to young people is there is no one path. So find your path, and your path might be you're looking for economic value creation. It might be social value. It might be environmental value, whatever, gets you going. Gets you passionate, because although passionate is insufficient, it's absolutely necessary. It's what keeps you going when you'd rather quit.
Yeah.
But you also have to pay attention to the detail.
You've been here for 9 years now, and you've observed a lot, obviously. And we started the show to talk about the future and where we're going as a province. But I think it might be helpful for people to get a glimpse from your perspective on where we've come from in the last 9 years. Like, have we advanced? Are we becoming more entrepreneurial as a province? Are we becoming more innovative? Are our future business leaders, are they coming from a place of better strength than they were 9 years ago? What does that look like from your perspective?
So the line I used when I first got here was, it's a tale of two cities. And you had this, so 2012 I came. So this booming energy sector. And then you had other. Inside other was tech, but there was also arts and culture, and it was fascinating for me. And fortunately, that other sector grabbed me and gave me opportunities and pulled me in. What I think has happened in the last 9 years is there's been more of a coming together that it isn't an us or them, and some of it is because out of necessity. When you lose your job, you'll shift industries. Mm-hmm. But I think it's been fascinating to watch some of the. I'm on the board of Adibotics, mm-hmm. and the founder of Adibotics is fond of saying he couldn't have built his company in the middle of the energy boom because he wouldn't be able to afford the resources. And there's a lot similar to building robotics that isn't allowed to fail as there is in the energy sector. So I think that as hard as it is, it has actually freed up some of the resources, and I think we are getting our mojo back.
Yeah,
and it might be coming from different areas. I just read December housing sales were through the roof, most since 2007.
Yeah.
So I think people are starting to feel confident about our province and our sector, which is amazing.
Yeah, and and I'm not to try and plug Connect First, but I tell you, we are confident in the future, and it's one of the reasons we're really trying hard to reimagine what a credit union looks like for the 2020s. We don't think the business models of the last 20, 30, 100 years, quite frankly, in our industry are the ones that are going to take us to the next place. So we're going all in and betting on Alberta. One of the things I've heard you say before is it's you don't invest in the business, you invest in the person. And I'd love you to talk a little bit more around your belief in the individual. And you've already touched on that a little bit.
Yeah. So generally when I say that, I'm talking about young people, but I think you'll find most investors will say the same thing.
Right.
And so from an investor point of view, things are going to change.
Yeah.
So what you want is a team that can move with that change. But I remember I had this young student, Zach, come into my office and pitch me an idea. And it was the first time I ever met him. And it was a decent idea. So I reached out to a contact and I just said, is this even possible? And he went, no, it's not technically possible. So I just shot this student an email saying, sorry, it's not possible. And I didn't hear from him for 2 years. Because what I did was I judged the idea.
Right.
What I didn't do was realize that here's this young person who was thinking big and had the guts to walk into my office and share it. And I shot down the idea, and he was so tied to the idea that he viewed it as shooting him down. I've been doing this for 9 years. So the beauty of that is you get to make a mistake, reflect, and change. If you only do it a couple of years, you might not be able to get a chance to do that. Now, fortunately, Zach had enough grit to come back. So 2 years later, he came back and he'd already started to build a company, and he made, eventually did millions of dollars in revenue and did really well. But I'm always, what I've now learned working with young people is most of them are still searching, right? They're searching for what they want to do, what industry they want to work in, what's going to define them. So what they do is they dip their toe in different little pools of water. And if it's too cold, they pull it back. Like entrepreneurship is pretty hard as it is. Mm-hmm. Why would I add to that? Why would I make that water colder? And, to stretch the analogy too far, the longer you keep your toe in the water, the warmer it starts to feel.
Right on.
So my role now is to, take them with all their faults, with all the, the ideas rough. I might have heard the idea 50 times before, and just get them to go through a process. And as they go through that process, they start to learn, and they also start to get comfortable. They have their first failure really early, or not even failure, first massive pivot. It's just like, oh, that doesn't work. I had one student who joined my class insisting he wanted to build a fintech company. And you could just tell he's just been reading, right? And that's what I want to do. I want to do a fintech company. And halfway through the class, he came to me all sheepish and he said, I got another idea. And he shared it. And a classic pivot is when you while you're working on one idea, all this other, you learn so much that you decide, I should shift it a little bit. His pivot was from fintech to a disc golf company. So there was nothing leveraged in this
pivot. That's a big pivot. That's
and I just said to him, well, which one gets you up in the morning all excited? And he went, the disc golf. And I went, well, then do it. And he's out now building, technology-enabled discs for disc golf. So I think you always have to remember these, especially young people, they're still formulating who they're going to be. And if we want them to be entrepreneurial, we can't be slapping them down because, then we end up with more accountants than we need.
Yeah, right on.
God bless accountants. By the way.
Yeah, of course. We need them. They're important. But here's a question I've got for you that, and you would have witnessed a lot of people, obviously, in the last 9 years, never mind the last 30 years. The big debate, are entrepreneurs born or are they created? What do you think?
I don't think we could ever intentionally go out and create a Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah.
But we figured out how to create, I don't even know how many, hundreds of professional hockey players. So there is a process. So everybody points to the anomalies. And it's even as soon as somebody uses, frankly, when I use RIM as an example, I'm talking about anomaly.
Right.
Anytime somebody uses Apple as an example, you're talking about anomaly. So if we stop focusing on the anomalies, the Elon Musks of the world, I believe you absolutely can teach the process of entrepreneurship. You have to mix in that with the personality that we can't really change. Most of your personality is pretty baked. And that's why teams are so important. If you are not the outgoing, if your goal isn't to go out and talk to 100 people to determine whether you have a good idea or not, you better find somebody and name them a co-founder because they're going to do a lot of work and just say, you know what, I'm going to build it, you're going to sell it, and let's make this happen. So I think clearly there are so many small businesses in this province. I forget the number, but it's thousands. And every one of them is an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, right on.
I think the difference is sometimes knowing how to scale the business. So knowing how to start is much different than knowing how to scale. And not all businesses need to scale, first of all.
Right.
Like they're, if you employ people or even just employ yourself, then you're contributing to society. But those that are in a position to grow and scale, I think we need to figure out how to teach them, how to train them, how to encourage them. And we've actually been doing a lot of this in the last year at Mount Royal, is working with what we call scale-ups. And, companies that get to $5 million are doing well. They just don't know how to get to 50.
Right on.
And if we can support them, that might be the fastest path to creating jobs than starting at zero. And so we got to do it all is the answer.
Right on. And, I have to tell you, it's pretty incredible what you've done at Mount Royal, really building a reputation for the university, to building business leaders and entrepreneurs of the future and so on. A lot of young people I know are aspiring to go there just because of you and what you've done, which is cool. What would you say to people who, I've been in the workforce for 20 years, I have been that accountant, and now it's time for a change, I want to do something different. Where do I go? And I know you've been involved in organizations like Platform, and any advice? What do I do?
First of all, there's an amazing community built up around tech, I'd call it, like with Platform and Startup Calgary, and but view it as tech-enabled, right? And there's very few businesses out there now that don't leverage technology. Most of you look at most of the big businesses that have been created, even like the Ubers and that kind of stuff, there's no rocket science there.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's leveraging pretty much status quo technology to deliver new types of products. So get involved in that community. There's something called Rainforest. That's where you can start to get involved in it. I always say, if technology is something you want to learn, don't wait to be taught. It's so my son actually decided he wanted to relearn coding. He used to know, and so he just created a passion project. He decided he was going to build an app that put a beat under your podcast so you could work out and listen to podcasts. That was his goal. He had no idea how to do it. Next thing you know, he's reading books, he's doing free online courses. He's having coffees with people who know how to do it. And the funny thing is, in the process of all of that, you're going to get job offers.
Yeah.
Because you have something to point to. You're having these conversations with people. I'll take a coffee from anyone pretty much, but somebody who reaches out, who wants to pick my brain about, how to build this app is different than somebody reaching out saying, are you hiring? So I think, some of this is just entrepreneurs have they call it a locus of control. So they believe they're in control of their own destiny. And I think if you can get a bit of that, then you stop waiting for somebody to show you the way, and you start to dig into, there are so many free resources out there.
Yeah.
Now you need the motivation, and that sometimes is the hardest piece right now is finding that. And there's great programs. My good friend Jim Gibson just got named the dean at SAIT, who's going to build this advanced digital technology, School of Advanced Digital Technology. And they'll be rolling out some amazing programs for reskilling and retooling. But, again, don't wait. There's so many resources out there. And just get involved in the community and ask how you can help, as opposed to trying to take something away from the community right away. Just toss your hat in and say, I'm here to help. I understand financials. I understand this. Where do I volunteer? That's
very cool. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs, they get addicted to that thrill, building businesses, growing, like you've done it, in a couple, well, more than that, I think, instances where, obviously you saw the RIM take off, you becoming BlackBerry, you saw, your own business you built and sold to Intel. So now you've dedicated yourself to supporting others and helping build them. Do you miss that thrill, for starters? And secondly, do you ever think you might go back to that at some point?
Oh, I hate this question. So I don't miss the thrill. It sounds like I make this up, but I get most of the same thrill watching a young person achieve. My students never seem to leave. My favorite place to be, and I can't anymore, is Trolley 5. That's where If an alumni reaches out, we meet at Trolley 5. More often than not, I'm buying the beer. And so I'm living vicariously through them. I mean, not to overshare, but my wife and I, our little story was we had a surprise in second year university. So we didn't enjoy that surprise. His name was Christopher. So we didn't get to have a traditional 20s.
Right.
So what I'm trying to do in my 50s and my late 40s and 50s is to engage with these young people I actually miss. My kids are grown. I'm a grandfather now, for God's sakes.
Wow.
So I enjoy now working with these young people enough that I get the thrill out of it. I probably don't get the adrenaline rush, but with the adrenaline rush comes the downside, right? So I get most of the upside and I get none of the downside. Sitting on boards helps too, because you're dealing with a much higher level of problem. And so it keeps you sharp. I actually just think it's our obligation. Like if you've been fortunate enough to have some success and hit the age, it's not like I don't have enough hobbies to keep myself busy. So this is my hobby as well as my job. And I'm fortunate that Mount Royal wants to keep paying me and Platform wants me on their board. And God forbid I learn how to do a sport again or something.
No, that's very cool. That's very cool. Now, in the years ahead, like we need a lot more businesses being created in this province if we're going to be successful, if we're going to create the jobs that the future Albertans are going to want. One of the things I hear often is really it's fear of failure, that people are holding themselves back because what if things go wrong? Now, you've seen that side of the equation too, personally, and obviously you've seen it through others. What would you say to that individual who's holding back for that fear of failure?
It's interesting. There's fail fast. There's all these phrases out there. I struggle because the word failure, we've been ingrained since we were like 2 years old that that's a bad thing. And so I try to talk about learning constantly, right? So I wouldn't, the story I told about the fintech to disc golf, he didn't fail. He just learned that this isn't what he wanted to do. A lot of graduates who, their first company, they had to wind it down and then they created another one. And most people, if I'm sitting in an interview and I'm interviewing a young person for a job and I look on their resume and they've attempted to start something and they have a crash and burn story to tell me, you don't think I'm more impressed than the person that tells me their GPA was 3.8 or whatever it is? It's not so much fear of failure. I think it's fear of being blamed. Like it's what society views as how will they view me? I look at, one of our graduates, Andrew Brown. So he's this iconic young man in the ecosystem. He's this classic kind of person that, as an elder in the tech industry, it's time to turn it over to these people. So I don't know, Andrew's probably 30, but right out of school, he went and joined Startup Calgary and worked his butt off trying to create that startup community. Then he got his idea. And it was a company called TickTix, and they were going to take on the ticketing, the big guys, the StubHubs, and raised money and went through all this stuff and had to close it down. But oh my God, did that just all of a sudden his stock just went so high in this community. So he now runs something called the Calgary Innovation Coalition. He's working at Thin Air Labs. That's going to be an amazing addition to this community. So, I think that badge of honor of trying, and if you're successful, amazing. But if you're not, you have something to talk about that most people don't. Obviously you have to be smart about it. Like you don't want stupid failure. I don't watch Dragon's Den, haven't watched it for years because I find it so sad that the person, they mortgaged their house. They put
hard stories. Like
one of the lessons that my students have taught me almost is don't fall in love with your baby. Like you need to love it enough. But Scott Gravel, the founder of Adibotics, likes to say he spent 2 years looking for a reason not to start Adibotics. And that's the right attitude, right? How do you reduce the risk of this? Yeah. So don't just dive into it. Don't use all your money before you've even talked to anybody. So you can be dumb about this failure thing. And that's why I think entrepreneurship's a process. It's not just gut feel. And fortunately, we've figured this out and there's great books out there and it's now become pretty common knowledge on the lean startup approach. And how you have to share your ideas with people before you build them, as opposed to going into your garage and spending years building it and spending all your money and then launching it and everybody goes, huh? So it's, but it's a tough one. The word failure is so ingrained.
It's true. And people are scared of it. It's the social stigma that we're worried about or something, right? And yet, to your point, it actually increases our personal and professional equity when you've got that on your resume. I know you hear stories about in San Francisco where they have, bankruptcy parties and failure parties. And
I actually offered that. One of the first student our first alumni that had to close down the business. I said, let's hold a wake. And he said, I'm not really ready for that yet. So we haven't, but they do have these F up nights.
Right.
Say it, right? Where people come and share how they F'd up. It's also humbling. Like I think there's some entrepreneurs get a little arrogant.
Sure.
And I can remember after I sold my company, I got Google reached out to me for an interview and for a job position. And it was interesting because it was they're kind of iconic, Google, in the way they do it. Apparently, it's like these 10 steps, 10 different people you speak to all around the company.
Right.
But it started with a phone call. So I got a phone call from the head of Google Maps. And his first question was, what software product do you love? And I thought about it, and this is a while ago, and I said, LinkedIn, I think it's amazing how they're connecting the dots and blah, blah, blah. And he went, yeah, those guys are amazing. What is it about LinkedIn that drives you nuts? And I went blank, and I was like, and probably 10 seconds went by, and they went, okay, Ray, well, I got to go. Click.
Wow.
That was the end of my Google interview.
Wow.
So that was a blow to my ego. But it taught me that perhaps one of the most innovative companies in the world wants people that can find ways to improve even the things they love. And that is a lesson I will never forget. So now, I don't go through life critiquing every little thing, but if something frustrates me, I'd say that's an opportunity. Somebody should fix that. Not me, but somebody should fix that.
But that's a really good point. I mean, you can't make yourself miserable looking at the flaws and everything, but everything can be better. We can make everything improve, which is so true. And maybe that leads me to this question, which is a very selfish question here from us to you, Ray. But we're sincerely trying to do things differently. Like we believe fundamentally credit unions are so important in our society and in this province for the next decade. But we know we have to do things differently. And as we're reinventing Connect First, is there any advice for us on how we can be there for those future entrepreneurs, the business leaders of this province?
There's a classic book, I think, called something about market leadership, where they talk about there's really only 3 ways to get market leadership: product leadership, operational excellence, and customer intimacy. And you have to be good enough in all 3, but you have to choose one to be exceptional at. And, when I look at, a reasonably sized credit union versus the big banks, I can't imagine that you can compete on product leadership. Like the amount of money they're investing, operational efficiency perhaps, but there's economies of scale that you'll never hit.
Right.
But you've already got a head start on customer intimacy. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't invest in technology, but it means you're investing in it in order to get closer to your customer and to actually enchant your customer. And I think, most of us are pretty sticky with our 36-year-old decision as to what bank to go to.
For sure.
Not because we're loyal, because we view it as a commodity.
Right.
And I think if you can look at opportunities to pull these people closer, and the one that I tell every bank that'll listen, or bank-like people, is when you lend somebody like a business owner money, and you have this little clause in there that talks about a personal guarantee. Mm-hmm. So I have a situation, I won't give names, but that was the case for a very successful company, and they needed whatever, it was like a $2 million loan, and the founder was like, I don't want to personally guarantee this. The interest rate was amazing. So he turned to his board and he said, is anybody here willing to lend me money without a personal guarantee? And what would you require as a return?
Right.
And he ended up giving like twice the interest rate that the banks were offering him. So all this is, in my opinion, is the banks are going, I'm trying to compete on interest rates. If I compete on interest rates, I can't have any losses. Like I can't have any defaults. So I got to get them to personally guarantee it. Flip the story and go, no, what is in the best interest of that entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Best interest of that entrepreneur is that they don't feel like they're risking their house in order to grow the business.
Right.
Because we all want them to grow the business. And you have all the data.
Yep.
Like, you know how many are going to fail.
Yep.
You know what you'd have to charge in interest to satisfy that. So anyway, I'm not a banker. I'm the furthest thing from a banker. But it's just that notion of, if you deeply respect it, and I've got a, there are entities out there there are nonprofit entities that lend money to young entrepreneurs, and they have a personal guarantee. I can't imagine a better way to make sure they never do it again than to saddle them with $100,000 in debt because the first time didn't work.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the solution is there, but I think that's an example of truly getting closer to the customer, as opposed to looking at it. Operational efficiency is, make sure we cover every loan.
Yeah, right.
Customer intimacy says, no, let's figure out a better way.
And I love that, because as a credit union, we come from a place where credit unions were the first in Canada to lend on character, not collateral.
Right.
Like we've pioneered in a lot of ways over the years. We haven't done a very good job of that more recently, perhaps, but we want to bring that back. And so we're certainly working on a little bit of a back to the future strategy, where we want to be community builders, and we want to be there with those business owners, leaders, entrepreneurs of the future, and help build this province and make it a better place. So
Absolutely.
I appreciate your advice, Ray. Is there any other things you want to make sure our audience knows before we let you go?
Brad Zumwalt says this best, and Brad's an icon in the city and one of the founders of Rainforest. If we can just be average in the tech sector, so if we can just be at par per capita with Montreal and Vancouver and Waterloo, not even Toronto, we would create 50,000 jobs. So let's just be average. Once we're average, we can then look at being above average. But it's, if somebody came along and said, we got a path to 50,000 jobs, what would you do?
Yeah.
And you look at, so anyway, the city is starting to rally around that sector. Yeah. And it'll always be, 5% of GDP.
Yep.
But the other stat I heard is that the energy sector in the next few years is going to invest $30 billion in digital transformation.
Yeah.
We have to make sure some of that $30 billion finds its way into
not
Albertan
just
companies.
abroad or Toronto or whatever. Keep going down there, that line of thinking. If there was an easy button you could press, something you would change in the city to make it a better place, like what would that be?
I think it'd be the flow of capital that was perhaps earned in the energy sector and is rightfully hesitant. They might have. I've heard. I wasn't here. They got burned in the bubble, like the 2000 bubble of tech. If we can raise their level of comfort, then I think we can start to see that money flow. And most of the big successes we've seen in the last year of funding, sometimes they had an angel that was local, but often that the big dollars came from external, and that's okay. Like that's bringing money into the province is great. Yeah. But we do have this gap between, before you can go out and raise it from, Adabotics just raised money from the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, which is amazing. But before you get there, you needed the local person to make the bet on you. And so if we can have more of that, I think we'll get this flywheel going. And it'll be this virtuous cycle I talked about, right? Where we get these successes, those successes spawn off talent and money, who beget more success, and next thing you know, we're attracting more people, and the house I paid 9 years ago that has gone down in value will go back up.
I hear you on that, by the way. Yeah, we haven't enjoyed the real estate boom some parts of the world have yet.
No.
But it's a yet. And maybe that's the last question for you. If you could make any predictions, because this show is all about the next decade. Are there any predictions you would make about the future of Alberta, the future of Calgary?
What's the phrase? We overestimate what we can do in a year and we underestimate what we can do in 10. And so 10 years to me is long enough that flywheel can get going. And so I think in 10 years' time, we have a booming tech-enabled sector that is serving our existing industries, energy, ag, but is also, serving people outside of the province too. Like, I think that's the big, if we can make a shift where our companies know how to export, know how to sell outside of our borders, I think that'll have a huge impact on jobs and on the economy. And I'm amazed when I got here and we showed up and it's like, these, 6 square blocks or something, that's where you do business.
Yeah.
That's amazing. But we probably have to learn how to do business elsewhere as well.
Yeah, right on.
So I think all of that can happen in a decade, and it can happen faster. But I like that concept of, we underestimate what can happen in a decade. So
Totally.
So let's get to work now so that this is a as great a place as it is, and it is a great place. I mentioned I have a granddaughter in Toronto, and that isn't bringing my wife and I back. That's how great this place is. So
That's cool.
And there's a lot of people that feel that way.
We are very honored and grateful to have you on our show, Ray. Thank you so much. And on behalf of Connect First Credit Union, maybe we can work on you changing that 37-year-old decision. I'm just kidding about your bank. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Right. No, we really appreciate you joining us. And this has been a great conversation. And I can't wait for our next one, Ray.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. Next steps. So thank you so much, Ray. I have to say, you are an incredible guest. You're just a fun guy to talk to, but it's certainly, from my perspective, and I'm sure for much of our audience, it's just great to hear a little bit about the positive, the exciting things that are happening in our province. And I have to say that one of the things that really sticks with me is those young people, those people you're referring to that are changing Alberta for the future and preparing us for a more dynamic, a more exciting future, because they're building those businesses, they're taking those risks, and quite frankly, they're taking the step that we all collectively need them to take, so that we have a place that we can count on young people getting jobs in the future, and that we can feel confident to invest in. And I think from what I'm hearing today from you, Ray, we should all feel very confident about our future. But I can also say that when I think about those young people, we at Connect First Credit Union, we want to do more to support them too. And we want to play our part in helping build that future Alberta. So we are. And one of the things that we really believe in, and yes, we're bringing the latest technology to our members, and we're going to ensure they have the products, the services that they come to expect from financial institutions. But we believe in building relationships. And that means, getting to know each other. And it doesn't always mean you have to pick up the phone and have a conversation, but it means that we're there for our members when they need us. When we lend money to Jane, we're using deposits from John to make those things happen. And it kind of makes me, reminds me of one of my favorite movies of all time, It's a Wonderful Life, where George Bailey talks about, your money's in John's house and in Jane's house, and how we support each other, and they build a community, and they built Bailey Park to get people out of the slums. And this is the future that Connect First wants to bring to Alberta. We want to help each other. We want to help Albertans build the future that they want for their families, for their friends, for their loved ones. And we know we can play a bigger role there. But it does come down to relationships. And again, it doesn't mean an impersonal relationship all the time, but when you need someone, when you are starting that business, when you are building that business, when you're taking that leap of faith, when you're buying that larger house, when you're making an investment that makes you a little bit uncomfortable because it's a big deal, those relationships matter. And we want to be there for you. And we want to be as excited about your future as you are. So we're going to get back to work and continue building and reimagining what a credit union can look like for the 2020s, but stay posted because it's coming soon. We're going to be coming out with some very, very exciting things and launching Connect First into the marketplace in no time. So if you liked what you heard today, share it with your network and be sure to subscribe. But thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on What's Next Alberta.